Hi everyone, my name is Omar Al Hassan, and today I'll be persuading you using Monroe's motivated sequence on why parents should shy their kids away from contact sports. And when I say contact sports, I primarily mean the national, football. I start off by asking you a simple question here. If you could set your family up for the next few generations, and when I say set them up, I mean live very wealthy to the point where they probably wouldn't have to work for the rest of their lives, would you do it? But in exchange for setting them up for life, you would be putting your body through excruciating pain and excruciating mental problems to the point where when you become between the age ranges of 35 to 45 years old, you would start to experience such a decline in physical and mental health that you become unrecognizable to all of your loved ones. So let's jump right into it. When we talk about the NFL, we talk about one of the most physical sports that you can watch or you can partake in. The National Football League consists of playing offense and defense, where the defensive players are usually the ones who inflict physical contact on the offensive players. Now, NFL players are, I don't want to say armed with, but they're given shoulder pads, a helmet, and thigh pads and knee pads. And a lot of these players use the crowns of their helmets to lead in when they're tackling, which is an incorrect way to tackle, but it's become such a way to hit someone in the NFL that it's actually led to numerous injuries in the NFL, with the biggest now being concussions. Up until recently, concussion studies in the NFL were primarily something that wasn't even considered serious. Like a player would have a concussion on Tuesday, and their games are usually Thursday or Sunday. And on Sunday, he would be cleared by a doctor to play. But nowadays, if a player has a concussion, he'd have to go through concussion protocol, which would usually last a week. And if depending on the severity of the concussion, he would end up either usually missing the game, because nowadays they've discovered that a lot of the older players in the NFL from the past few generations have all been diagnosed with something called CTE. Now, CTE is chronic traumatic encephalopathy. It's a degenerative brain disorder found in athletes and usually military veterans and others with a history of repeated brain trauma. Now, I'm not a parent yet in my life, but one day I hope to be, and I would always support my children, and I would always support them in anything they want to do. But when it comes to football, when it comes to concussions, when it comes to CTE, when it comes to other horrific injuries they could suffer, I would be very weary to them and probably sit them down and explain to them the possibilities of their injuries and why I would strongly recommend them to shy away from football. Now, I personally, again, I'm a huge NFL fan. I love the NFL. My favorite player is Cam Newton. He's one of the most physically gifted players in the NFL. He's also one of the players that has been hit repeatedly on his head and has received lots of brain trauma. So I as a fan see that, and I worry for his own mental health, because after so many repeated hits to the head, after a while it gets to a point where he will most likely get CTE if he already doesn't have CTE, and in a few years he will be completely unrecognizable to his teammates, to his family, to everybody around him. And well, with the NFL again, because a lot of players don't know how to hit and don't know how to, or well, not don't know how to hit, but choose not to hit correctly, they end up hurting each other because of how fast the game is as well. The game is extremely fast nowadays. It's not as slow as it used to be back in the 90s and early 2000s. Nowadays, the NFL is very fast because a lot of players have become faster. And with all this speed now on the field, a lot of players are getting hurt more and more and more. Now, when it comes back to why I know that parents should shy their kids away from the sport, the number of injuries has increased steadily in the NFL. The number of significant injuries, the number of torn ACLs has increased. But again, the biggest thing that has affected my judgment of why parents should shy their kids away from football is concussions. And again, with CTE, CTE is something that appears usually in a person's late 20s or 30s, and it really affects a player's mood and behavior. Sometimes the changes are minor, but usually they're pretty severe, to the point where a former player will start to battle anxiety and depression and paranoia and start to lash out at his loved ones. Just recently, a football player named Junior Seau ended up committing suicide because based on his brain, the study of his brain, they found that he is developing CTE. Now, based on brain scans done to those with CTE, they noticed clumps of tau, which is protein, building up in their brains. As the disease continues to progress, they start to have problems with thinking, with memory, with confusion, and it becomes to a point where it's just so overwhelming for the person that they're almost they lose complete control of themselves because of all the physical pain they're in, because of all the confusion they feel. It's something that, again, if I were a parent, I would be extremely worried about with my son or with my son playing football. And it is scary to see. And I believe that with 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 the proper training, and may, when I say proper training, I don't mean with better training and better hitting techniques. Because at the end of the day, the NFL is so fast that it doesn't matter how where what could happen. At the wrong step, you could blow out your knee and end your career. NFL linebacker named Ryan Shazier was in the middle of a play last year. He put his head down to tackle someone, and he ended up going limp and almost became paralyzed. Now, I never I don't have any relation to him personally, but if I was his son, his daughter, his mom, his dad, his sister, his brother, I would be horrified to see that although my brothers or my son or my dad or whatever is out there making millions of dollars to support me, he's also out there sacrificing his body for me, which personally I don't think I would ever be able to get over. Now, the NFL is, again, it's a multi-billion-dollar business and it makes a lot of money. And again, as a player, as a person, you can make a lot of money in the league. But at the end of the day, is it really worth your own physical health to play a sport that is almost barbaric, where it's almost similar to throwing two gladiators in a cage and fighting to the death? With that being a little bit of an exaggeration, of course, because NFL players don't die, but eventually, because of all the physical trauma and physical and mental trauma they experience, it could eventually lead to their death. Now, I think the best way for parents to shy their kids away from this sport is to sit them down and to calmly and efficiently tell them that all the consequences and all the potential injuries they can experience playing football. But of course, you can always experience injuries doing other things, playing other sports. But I believe because of the speed of the NFL and the physicality of the NFL, children and other athletes are more likely to experience injuries. And to wrap this speech up, to hit back on numerous points, the reason parents should shy their kids away from football, from this contact sport, is due to CTE, concussions, and other potential injuries that their children could suffer. And as painful as hard as that is for me as an NFL fan to say, and I love the NFL, and I don't ever want to see it go away. But with the increasing number of injuries, with the increasing number of players who sustain concussions, with the increasing lawsuits that the NFL is being hit with, it's hard to say that the NFL's future is bright, even though it is a multi-billion-dollar business and does continue to grow. Eventually, these lawsuits will catch up to the NFL, and the NFL will have its own issues to deal with in the near future.